On the day the Voraxian fleet entered Earth's atmosphere, humanity learned that aliens had been watching them for centuries and had been terrified the entire time. Commander Lyrics stood before the United Nations Assembly, her translucent skin shimmering under the harsh lights. 6 limbs arranged in perfect symmetry. She appeared both elegant and utterly alien. The quantum translator at her throat pulsed with each carefully chosen word. "You must understand," she said, mandibles clicking softly. "We have monitored your broadcasts, your literature, your cultural artifacts. For generations we believed humans could consume souls." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Ambassador Reeve Kendrick leaned forward. "Consume souls? That's absurd. Is it?" Lyrics's compound eyes flickered in what the humans would later learn was their version of raised eyebrows. "Your species has thousands of stories about creatures that drain life essence. Vampires, wraiths, soul-eaters, entities that live between life and death, stealing the vital essence of sentient beings." The room fell silent, and your entertainment broadcasts these horror scenarios to children. We observe them having fun, being terrified. What kind of species treats terror as entertainment? Dr. Ilani Okafor, Earth's foremost xenobiologist, stepped forward. "Commander Lyrics, these are just stories, fiction, they're not real." "Perhaps to you, but for the Galactic Confederacy, the concept was troubling, particularly when we discovered your species possesses a unique neurological structure." On the enormous viewscreen behind her, a human brain appeared, certain regions glowing with unnatural brightness. This pattern is unprecedented. The same brain architecture that allows humans to experience empathy also creates a strange resonance we cannot fully explain. When your kind experiences strong emotions, they generate fluctuations in what you might call the psychic field. Fleet Admiral Vosh, a hulking figure with obsidian scales, joined Lyrics at the podium. "To put it simply, humans radiate emotional energy. We can feel it. All spacefaring species can. When humans feel intense fear or pain, that energy ripples outward. When humans feel joy or love, similarly." "You're saying humans are psychic?" President Malouf asked incredulously. "Not consciously," Vosh clarified, "but the effect is powerful enough that many species believed humans could indeed consume souls as your myths suggest. We feared making contact for generations." "What changed?" Kendrick asked. Lyrics and Vosh exchanged glances. "The Nexari," Lyrics said simply. "They're coming. And humanity's unique abilities represent the only hope for the galaxy." Dr. Okafor frowned. "Who are the Nexari?" "They are what your myths warned of," Vosh rumbled. "Beings that exist partly in normal space and partly in what you might call dark space. They don't consume souls, that's your mythology speaking, but they feed on consciousness itself. They've destroyed 17 civilizations in the outer spiral arm already. And you think we can stop them?" President Malouf's voice was skeptical. "We know you can," Lyrics said, "because the human emotional resonance disrupts their feeding patterns. Your fear stories, they're not just entertainment, they're like psychological antibodies. Your species has been unconsciously preparing for this threat for millennia." Kendrick sat back stunned. "So humanity's ghost stories and monster tales are why we've come," Vosh finished. "The creatures your ancestors feared in the darkness, they weren't entirely imaginary, and now we need those fears channeled, focused, weaponized to save us all." The assembly erupted in chaos as the implications sank in. In the back of the room, unnoticed by most, an elderly woman named Mariska Volkov smiled faintly. As former keeper of Eastern European folklore at the Global Archives, she had always known the old stories held power. She just hadn't realized how literal that power would turn out to be. 3 months after first contact, the Global Defense Initiative headquarters bustled with frenetic energy. Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, humans and alien allies worked side by side, racing against the Nexari's inevitable arrival. Mariska Volkov, now heading the Mythic Resonance Division, studied readouts from the latest test subject. Doran Ravid lay in the modified MRI machine, his mind projecting vivid nightmares onto surrounding screens. His fear signature is exceptionally strong, noted Zephyx, the spindly Eltharian neurologist. Perhaps the strongest we've recorded. Mariska nodded solemnly. Doran spent 15 years as a war correspondent. His nightmares are authentic. The facility had identified 300 humans with unusually potent emotional projections, dubbed resonators by the scientific team. Most were trauma survivors, artists, or individuals with heightened empathic abilities. Their training had become the cornerstone of Earth's defense strategy. Commander Lyrics entered the chamber, her exoskeleton clicking softly against the polished floor. The Nexari Vanguard has passed Proxima Centauri. We have less than 60 days. Mariska sighed. We're accelerating the program, but controlled projection remains difficult. The resonators can broadcast fear, but focusing it requires immense concentration. On the observation deck above, Admiral Vosh conferred with General Petra Neves, Earth's military liaison. Between them hovered a holographic display of the solar system. The Nexari vessels don't follow conventional physics, Vosh explained. They move through folds in space-time, appearing and disappearing at will. So conventional weapons are useless, Petra concluded grimly. Worse than useless. Physical attacks strengthen their connection to normal space. The more you fight them, conventionally the more solid they become. Then how exactly do our fear projectors hurt them? Vosh's scales shifted color, the alien equivalent of a troubled frown. The Nexari exist partially in what we call the consciousness layer of reality. Human fear, specifically fears of soul-consuming entities, creates disruptions in this layer that the Nexari cannot tolerate. Below, Doran emerged from the machine pale and shaking. Mariska handed him a thermal blanket and steaming cup. You did well, she said gently. Better than yesterday. It doesn't feel like enough, Doran replied, voice hollow. I keep projecting the same fears, war zones, collapsing buildings, gunfire. But the Nexari are different. That's why we've brought in the shamans and storytellers, Mariska explained, to help resonators connect with more primordial fears. In the adjacent chamber, resonators sat in a circle around Elder Kiona, whose ancestors had preserved Navajo skinwalker legends for generations. Her low, rhythmic chanting guided them through ancient terrors, shapeshifters that stole not just bodies but identities, essence hunters that left empty shells behind. Dr. Okafor monitored their brain activity. Amazing, she murmured. These cultural narratives activate neural pathways that modern horror doesn't touch. Meanwhile, in the weapons division, engineers incorporated resonator technology into defensive platforms. Vessels fitted with amplifiers could theoretically project a single resonator's emotional signature across vast distances of space. Lyrics approached Mariska as she reviewed the day's data. There's something I haven't told your leadership, she confessed quietly. About the Nexari. Mariska looked up sharply. What is it? They're drawn to Earth specifically because of humans. Your emotional radiation. It's like a beacon to them. A feast they cannot resist. So we brought this upon ourselves? No. Lyrics's mandibles twitched anxiously. You misunderstand. The Nexari have always been coming. Your species evolved these defenses, these fear stories, because somehow deep in your collective unconscious you always knew they would come. Mariska felt a chill run down her spine. You're saying our myths aren't just weapons against the Nexari, they're prophecies, Lyrics finished. Warning signals from your own evolutionary past. The first Nexari incursion hit a remote research station on Europa. One moment, the 27 researchers were conducting routine ice core analysis. The next, 17 were dead, their bodies intact but devoid of neural activity, eyes open and unseeing. The survivors described shadowy figures that seemed to phase in and out of reality, entities that absorbed light rather than reflected it, moving with unnatural fluidity as though the laws of physics were merely suggestions. They came through the walls, whispered Dr. Lane Harville, the station's director, her voice trembling during the debriefing. Not breaking through, just existing suddenly where they hadn't before. And when they touched Keenan, he just emptied out, like watching a cup being drained. The video footage showed only strange distortions in the air, but the resonators could see more. When shown the recordings, they uniformly described wraith-like entities with undulating appendages that reached not for bodies, but for the space just above them. At GDI headquarters, emergency protocols activated. The first deployment of resonators was accelerated by necessity. "We're not ready," Mariska argued in the war room. "The amplification technology is still experimental." Admiral Vosh's scales had darkened to nearly black. "Ready or not, the Nexari are here. This was just a scouting party, testing our defenses," General Petra nodded grimly. "They're learning our physical vulnerabilities." "No," Lyrics corrected. "They're learning our emotional topography. Each death creates ripples of grief and terror they can navigate by." The first defensive squadron launched the following day, 3 resonators accompanied by 6 alien pilots aboard specially modified vessels. Their mission was to create a psychic perimeter around Mars, where intelligence suggested the next incursion would occur. Doran Ravid led the human contingent, his fear projection amplified thousandfold by Varaxian technology. Beside him flew Elora Wynn, whose childhood encounters with sleep paralysis had gifted her with unusually vivid terror images, and Vance Calum, whose experiences as a deep-sea explorer had cultivated a profound fear of the vast unknown. They established orbit around Mars as Earth watched breathlessly. The wait was brief. "Contact." Elora's voice crackled over comms, multiple signatures emerging from Valles Marineris. The Nexari materialized like ink diffusing through water. First one, then dozens, then hundreds. Dark, undulating forms rose from the Martian canyon in a silent swarm. "Project now," commanded the Ultharian captain. The resonators closed their eyes and opened their minds, broadcasting their most primal fears into the void. Amplifiers hummed as they transformed human terror into weaponized emotional energy. The effect was immediate and astonishing. Where the projected fear waves met Nexari entities, the shadows convulsed and recoiled. Several smaller forms dissipated entirely, while larger ones twisted into impossible geometries as they retreated. "It's working," Vance shouted, but their victory was short-lived. The remaining Nexari suddenly changed tactics. Instead of retreating, they converged, merging into a single massive entity that pulsed with negative light. This unified presence turned toward the defensive squadron and projected something back, not fear, but a cold, alien hunger that assaulted the human minds. Doran screamed first as the psychic backlash overwhelmed his defenses. Blood trickled from his nose as he collapsed in his harness. Elora and Vance followed seconds later, their projections faltering. The Nexari collective surged forward, engulfing 2 Varaxian ships in its expanding shadow. Their crews died instantly, consciousness consumed. "Fall back," the surviving captain ordered. "Emergency return protocol." As the remaining ships retreated, the Nexari entity did not pursue. Instead, it lingered in Martian orbit, growing larger as it absorbed the consciousness remnants of its victims. Back on Earth, the mission was declared a partial success. They had confirmed that human fear resonance could harm the Nexari, but the cost was devastating. The survivors remained catatonic, their minds burned out by the Nexari's counterprojection. In the medical bay, Mariska stood over Doran's bed, watching his vacant eyes track nothing. "We underestimated them," Lyric said softly from behind her. "They can adapt, learn, evolve." "Then so must we," Mariska replied, her voice hardening with resolve. "If they can unify their consciousness to amplify their power, perhaps we can do the same." She turned to Dr. Okafor. "We need to modify our approach. Individual fear projections aren't enough. We need a collective nightmare, a unified human response." Lyric's compound eyes widened. "You're suggesting a mass consciousness link? The neural strain could kill the participants." "Perhaps," Mariska acknowledged. "But if we don't find a way to counter the Nexari's unified form, we're all dead anyway." Neural synchronization at 87% and holding. Dr. Okafor's voice was clinical. betraying none of the anxiety she felt watching the 100 volunteer resonators in the vast circular chamber. Each lay in a specialized pod, white neural filaments connecting their temples to the central hub, a modified version of Varaxian consciousness-sharing technology. General Petra observed from the command center, face grim. How long before they can generate a unified projection? Unknown, Mariska answered honestly. This goes beyond anything the Varaxians have attempted. Human minds resist synchronization. Our individualism makes collective consciousness difficult. In the 2 weeks since the Mars disaster, the Nexari had established a presence throughout the solar system. Jupiter's moons were lost entirely, their research outposts going silent one by one. The unified Nexari entity had split into 3 equally massive forms, each seemingly stronger than the original. Earth's outer defenses detected incursions daily. The psychic perimeter, maintained by rotating teams of resonators, could repel smaller Nexari scouts, but everyone knew it was only delaying the inevitable. Inside the synchronization chamber, the resonators' minds slowly, painfully aligned. Their individual fears, from ancient folklore to modern horrors, began to blend, creating a composite nightmare landscape that no single human could have imagined. Yasu Mekonnen, a former anthropologist specializing in Ethiopian demon myths, became the unexpected focal point. His knowledge of the Buddha, shape-shifting entities that fed on human essence, provided a cultural framework that resonated across the collective consciousness. Something's happening, Dr. Okafor reported, studying the neural activity displays. Their individual brainwaves are harmonizing around Iyasu's fear patterns. On the monitoring screens, the collective nightmare took shape, a primal landscape where darkness itself had hunger and intent, where shadows reached with purpose, where the very concept of consciousness predation materialized in a form that even alien minds could comprehend. Projection integrity at 60%, a technician called out. 70? 75? Warning alarms blared suddenly. Nexari incursion detected. Multiple entities breaching Luna perimeter. General Petra snapped into action. How many? Hundreds, converging into one of the major forms. It's heading directly for Earth. Mariska looked desperately at the synchronization readouts. They're not ready. We need at least another hour for full alignment. We don't have an hour, Petra replied grimly. The lunar defense teams are already gone. Lyrix's mandibles clicked, rapidly, a sign of extreme distress. We must activate the projection now, even at partial synchronization. It's our only chance. Dr. Okafor shook her head. The neural strain could kill them all. If we don't, the Nexari will consume every consciousness on this planet, Vosh countered. The resonators knew the risks. After a moment of agonized silence, Mariska nodded. Activate the planetary amplifiers. Channel the collective projection through the global network. Throughout the world, enormous amplification towers, built in desperate haste over the past months, hummed to life. Designed to broadcast the resonators' unified fear across the entire Earth-Moon system, they represented humanity's last, best hope. In synchronization pods, resonators convulsed as their partial collective consciousness was forced outward prematurely. Blood vessels burst in eyes and noses, but their minds remained locked in the shared nightmare. The massive Nexari entity paused its approach as the first waves of projected fear washed over it. The amorphous shadow writhed, sections of its vast form dissolving under the psychic assault. For a moment, hope flared in the command center. Then the entity adapted. Its churning darkness condensed, forming a shell against the fear waves. It resumed its inexorable approach toward Earth, wounded but determined. In the synchronization chamber, Iyasu's body arched in his pod, eyes snapping open. It's learning, he gasped, faster than we can adapt. The projection isn't strong enough, Mariska realized with dawning horror. We need something more. Through their neural link, Iyasu communicated with the other resonators. A desperate plan formed in their collective consciousness, one with no guarantee of survival. They're changing the projection pattern, Dr. Okafor reported, confused. They're inverting it somehow. Lyrix's compound eyes widened in understanding. They're not projecting fear outward anymore, they're drawing the Nexari in. What? That's suicide, General Petra protested. They're creating a trap, Vosh rumbled. A psychic honeypot. On the screens, the Resonator's collective nightmare transformed from a weapon into a lure, a tantalizing promise of consciousness. More rich, more complex, more satisfying than anything the Nexari had encountered before. The approaching entity hesitated, then altered course directly toward the synchronization facility. Everyone out, General Petra ordered. Evacuate all non-essential personnel. But Mariska stayed, watching the monitors as the Nexari accelerated toward them, hungry for the feast being offered. The facility trembled as darkness descended upon it. Alarms wailed as security systems detected impossible breaches, walls, floors, and ceilings suddenly permeable to the encroaching shadow. Containment field active, reported the last remaining technician, fingers flying across controls. Synchronization. Chamber sealed. In the adjoining room, Mariska, Dr. Okafor, Lyrix, and Vosh watched through reinforced observation windows as the Nexari entity poured into the chamber like liquid night, surrounding the 100 resonator pods. Life support systems holding, Dr. Okafor whispered. Neural synchronization at 93%. Inside the pods, the resonators lay still now, their consciousness fully merged into a single shared mind. A psychic entity of unprecedented power. At its center remained Iyasu, his physical body little more than an anchor for the collective will now facing the Nexari. Through the neural monitoring system, fragments of the confrontation translated into comprehensible data. We know what you, are the human collective communicated. The Nexari entity pulsed with cold light, circling the pods with predatory intent. We have been hunting your kind across galaxies, came the alien response. Thoughts like ice shards embedding in the observers' minds. You are food? Nothing more. We are more than you understand? The collective answered. We have been preparing for you since we first dreamed. The entity paused, dark tendrils probing at the neural interfaces connecting the resonators. Your fear sustains us, it projected. Your consciousness will feed us for centuries. Then feed. The bright invitation stunned the observers. On the neural activity monitors, the resonator's collective mind opened itself fully to the Nexari. What are they doing? General Petra demanded, having refused evacuation. I don't understand. Lyrix's mandibles clicked anxiously. They're allowing the Nexari to connect directly to their consciousness. This is a trap, Mariska finished quietly. The oldest trap in human mythology. The Nexari entity surged forward, eagerly, dark tendrils connecting with each pod simultaneously. The chamber filled with shadow as the consciousness predator began to feed. For several seconds, nothing seemed to happen. Then the neural activity monitors spiked wildly. The Nexari entity convulsed, its amorphous form contorting in what could only be described as agony. What is this? Its psychic scream penetrated even the shielded observation room. On the monitors, the answer became clear. The resonators had created not just a unified consciousness, but a psychic labyrinth, a maze, of human fear stretching back to the dawn of the species. Every nightmare, every primal terror, every dark myth that had kept humans alert around ancient campfires, all arranged in an endless, recursive pattern. The Nexari had entered willingly, hungry for consciousness, but now found itself trapped in humanity's collective nightmare, unable to disconnect from the feast that was poisoning it. Remarkable, Vosh rumbled. They've weaponized the very thing that made humans vulnerable, your species' capacity for fear. Dr. Okafor studied the readings with growing concern. The resonators can't maintain this much longer. Their vital signs are failing. Inside the HFY chamber, the Nexari entity thrashed wildly, darkness flickering as it tried to withdraw from the neural connection. But the resonators held fast, their collective will keeping the predator ensnared in their shared nightmare. You cannot escape, they projected. You have consumed our fear for too long. Now our fear consumes you. The entity's struggles grew more desperate as the recursive nightmare loop tightened around it like a noose. dark tendrils began to dissolve, returning to the nothingness from which they had emerged. "We are ancient," the Nexari projected weakly. "We have devoured civilizations." "We are older," the collective responded. "We have imagined monsters since we first looked into the dark and sensed something looking back." One by one, the resonator's vital signs flatlined as they poured their remaining life energy into maintaining the trap. Iyasu was the last, his consciousness serving as the anchor point for the labyrinth, even as his body surrendered. With a final silent scream that registered only as a spike on the psychic monitors, the Nexari entity imploded. The shadow that had threatened Earth collapsed into itself, drawn completely into the labyrinth the dying resonators had created. Then, silence. In the synchronization chamber, 100 bodies lay still in their pods, empty vessels whose consciousness had become the prison of humanity's oldest predator. Dr. Okafor wept quietly. General Petra stood rigid, face ashen. Lyrics and Vosh performed the solemn gestures of their respective species' mourning rituals. Mariska alone approached the chamber door. "We need to destroy this facility," she said softly. "Completely. The Nexari is contained but not destroyed. If these bodies are disturbed..." "Agreed," General Petra replied hoarsely. "I'll order orbital bombardment once we've evacuated." As they prepared to leave, Mariska paused at the observation window, looking one last time at the still forms of the 100 who had sacrificed themselves. Among them, Iyasu's face appeared almost peaceful. "The oldest stories warned us," she murmured. "Every culture had tales of soul eaters, consciousness predators. We thought we were just afraid of the dark. But the dark was actually afraid of you," Vosh finished solemnly. 5 years later, humanity looked to the stars with new eyes. The memorial in Geneva stood 300 feet tall, a spiral of obsidian and light containing the names of the 100, as they had come to be known. At its center burned an eternal flame, symbol of the consciousness that had sacrificed itself to save a world. Mariska Volkov, now considerably grayer but no less determined, guided a group of young resonators through the memorial gardens. Since the victory, as it was called, thousands of humans had discovered their latent abilities, an evolutionary adaptation accelerated by necessity. The other 2 Nexari entities retreated beyond the heliosphere after their sibling was trapped, she explained to her students. The Varaxian long-range sensors tracked them at the edge of the Oort cloud, watching, waiting, but afraid to approach. Young woman with striking green eyes raised her hand. "Professor Volkov, why don't we hunt them down? Finish them?" Mariska smiled sadly. "Because the cost would be too great, Illyria. The trap the 100 created requires consciousness sacrifice. We won't pay that price again unless absolutely necessary." The memorial tour continued to the technology wing, where Dr. Okafor, now director of xenopsychology at the newly established Interspecies Academy, demonstrated the latest developments in resonance technology. "By studying the neural patterns of the 100, we've developed non-lethal projection methods," she explained. "Modern resonators can generate protective fields without synchronization risks." The surrounding exhibits showcased humanity's rapid advancement since the Nexari incursion. Varaxian consciousness-sharing technology had been adapted for educational purposes. Oltharian neural interfaces had revolutionized medicine. Earth's first true interstellar vessels were under construction, built around cores designed to project human emotional resonance, a warning beacon to any consciousness predators that might lurk between stars. In orbit, the massive Galactic Embassy Station hosted representatives from 27 alien civilizations. First contact had expanded exponentially after Earth's defense against the Nexari. Species that had hidden from the ancient predators for millennia now sought alliance with the humans who had done the impossible. Admiral Vosh, serving as military liaison to Earth's new defense fleet, often remarked that humanity had earned its place among the stars not through technological superiority, but through the weaponization of its greatest vulnerability. In the 5 years since victory, no Nexari incursions had been detected in any Confederacy system, but humanity remained Vigilant. The Global Defense Initiative maintained constant resonator patrols throughout the solar system. Children were screened for resonance abilities and trained from an early age. And the stories continued. Perhaps the greatest cultural shift had been humanity's relationship with fear itself. Where once horror tales were merely entertainment, they were now recognized as evolutionary tools. Early warning systems embedded in cultural consciousness. Ancient myths were studied with new reverence, folk traditions preserved as potential weapons. Every night somewhere on Earth, someone told a ghost story, and somewhere in the darkness between stars, the Nexari trembled. On the 10th anniversary of victory, a special ceremony was held at the Geneva Memorial. Representatives from every human nation and allied alien species gathered to honor the sacrifice of the 100 Mariska, now nearing 80, took the podium as Earth's designated speaker. Behind her stood Lyrics and Admiral Vosh, along with the leaders of 17 alien worlds. 10 years ago, she began, her voice still strong. Humanity learned that our oldest fears were never just stories. The monsters in our myths, the shadows, that haunted our collective dreams, they were echoes of a real threat, warnings passed down through generations. The vast crowd listened in solemn silence. But we also learned something more important. Those same fears were our greatest strength. What the Nexari thought was our vulnerability became their undoing. She gestured to the spiral monument gleaming in the sunlight. The 100 who gave their lives created something unprecedented. A conscious trap that still holds one of the greatest threats our galaxy has ever known. Their sacrifice bought us not just survival, but understanding. Among the audience, the new generation of resonators stood at attention, their trained minds projecting not fear now but solemn respect. We go to the stars now not in fear, but in knowledge. We carry our stories with us, not as burdens but as shields, and we make this promise to the darkness between worlds. Humanity remembers its nightmares. We have faced our fears and made them our strength. As Mariska spoke, resonance monitors around the world detected a faint signal from the sealed facility that still contained the trapped Nexari entity. A flicker of awareness, a testing of boundaries. Then, almost immediately, a response. Thousands of trained resonators instinctively reinforcing the psychic prison, their collective will a silent but unmistakable message. We are still here. We are still watching. We remember. The signal subsided. In her closing remarks, Mariska recited the phrase that had become Earth's unofficial motto in the post-contact era, words now emblazoned above the entrance to every resonance training facility and Starship launch pad. The darkness has always feared us. Now it knows why. In the vastness of space, beneath the light of distant suns, countless civilizations that had lived in terror for millennia looked toward Earth with something new in their alien hearts. Hope. The species that had weaponized nightmares had changed everything.